Cord to the cloud. Okay, thank you, Ed. Good morning for those, or evening, or whenever you're listening to it, for those who are on recording. Good to see you. Glad that you're watching it live or in in recording. For those of us here live in Fair Lawn, New Jersey, welcome everyone. Good morning, Rini.
Good
Okay,
morning.
you there too. Okay, so I also sent out, and some of you may get the text, an article that I received from the Mount Sinai. Once you see a doctor, you're on their email for life, you know. Uh, so I receive emails from multiple. This is no surprise. You should know. I receive emails from multiple medical organizations, hospitals, practices, all sorts of things, all the time. And actually, sometimes they're quite interesting. Uh, I don't know if we're going to discuss it in class. Carol, did you have a chance to take a look at that article?
I just downloaded it. I just saw
Okay.
that you
Well, we'll see if we have a chance.
did.
It's not a question of our concern about Jewish law, but I do believe it's our concerns to be as educated as we can objectively about transgender issues, which have been so far politicized that having if Mount Sinai sends it out, I would have to assume we're talking about very reputable, also easy to understand because they send it out, material about how a doctor who is at the front lines of dealing with transgender people sees the issues, which I think is important for us. We'll see if hopefully we'll have time to look at that today along with the other things. It certainly, frankly, I learned quite a bit from it, just as I've learned from a lot of the material that we have been looking at. Okay, so let us begin, and let's finish. We're going to finish with the whoops, gotta do something with the
Tell me when to go inside.
what's going on here? So something has happened. Is that? Huh.
Oh,
No. Hmm.
Tell us what page you're on with Rabbi.
Okay. I'm going to be starting with the end of the Rabbi Sharzer Teshuvah. We didn't quite finish it. We will finish it today. We last time got up to page 21 of that Teshuvah. And so go back 20. Okay, here we go. Permissible. Okay, it's a question of hormonal therapy. Okay, that's where we were, page 21 in the Rabbi Sharzer Teshuvah that was presented to the Rabbinical Assembly. And as we learned, Rabbi Sharzer was both a well-known medical professional, and he was a graduate of the Jewish Theological Seminary's rabbinical school. So he is uniquely positioned to be able to give us insight into this issue. And I hope that we've learned quite a bit about the question of transgender and how to deal with it in Jewish law. And we're going to really come to his conclusions this week. Okay, we all got that? Okay. Interesting question. This is something that has been, we'll see this in a couple of places today. Is hormonal therapy permissible, right? Now, when we're talking about plastic surgery, that's one area. Hormonal surgery, hormonal therapy is a matter not of cutting or making changes with the physical body, but that is just a matter of injecting hormones. So, as in the case of the surgery, if the risk is relatively small, right, we're not allowed to put ourselves in danger in general. And the goal of the treatment to alleviate symptoms of psychological distress, there are no grounds to prohibit its use. Now, we know there's a whole issue, which if we have time, we'll take a look at the question of minors. As you well know, there has been a political this debate of this. We'll take a look at that in a little later. Nor should there be any suspicion of a violation of the biblical prohibition against a man's wearing a woman's clothing or vice versa. He's just saying, look, let's not worry about that. we know that in the traditional communities, that is an issue. In the traditional communities, women will almost never wear pants, right? I mean, you see that. And that has become a societal norm that outside of the mostly strict, and I'm talking about strict Orthodoxy, modern Orthodoxy, this is not an issue. Modern Orthodox women wear pants, come on. But in the most strictly Orthodox, you drive through Williamsburg in the Hasidic areas, you're not going to see any women with tights or pants or anything of that nature. But he's saying that's just nowadays not an issue, okay? Hormonal treatment would be permitted. But this is from Rabbi Rabinowitz, so now even going back some years, and would not transgress the prohibition of wearing the garments of the other sex or changing that which was created, since it is a case of the tovato. In other words, it's for the benefit of that person, for the good of the patient. And bechol mitrapim, since there are no restrictions on what type of medicine. In any case, you have to heal people. So we're looking at gender dystopia as a real medical condition. It's not somebody who wakes up one morning and chooses, gee, I'd like to be a different gender. No, it is something, as Rabbi Sharza has argued throughout the Teshuvah, that it is embedded very deeply in the personhood of the transgender person. And unfortunately, as we've seen on some of the political debates, oh, they wake up one morning, decide to be something else. No, they go to school one day and they come back something else. No, that has absolutely no reality. However you feel about some of the other issues, that sort of discussion has unfortunately muddied our whole understanding of transgender issues. Okay, what about pregnancy in a transgender man? Someone who does not have surgery or even hormonal therapy. That could happen. So the question is, of course, if we had some hormonal therapy, that might hurt the possibility and the question of how the pregnancy will progress. It is incumbent upon the medical professional to advise patients about possible risks, the most current medical information in order to make informed decisions. Okay, I mean, that just is fairly clear. General medical care, they've been talked about. Several states in the United States have passed laws requiring transgender people to use public restrooms according to the gender assigned on their birth certificates. How many of you have been in public places where you've seen non-gendered bathrooms? It's all over the place, right? I mean, certainly I've seen the signs, and I think I mentioned this, but I might not mention it here. I went to Philharmonic Hall, and I was on the lobby level, the lower level. Actually, it's the public level. Anybody can walk in there. The lobby public level of the renovations of what's now called David Geffen Hall. I'll give him his credit. So I said, "Where's the bathroom?" And they pointed me in the right direction. I went to the bathroom, and what is the bathroom there? One very large room. On one side of the room, there are stalls with doors. On the other side of the room are sinks. Anybody, male, female, transgender, no matter what, you've got privacy when you go to the bathroom, and anybody walks in there. It does feel a little odd, I will admit, when I first went in there. But that's it. That's an interesting comment about how to avoid these questions, which bathroom to use. They made it easy, one for everybody. And at Mount Sinai in particular, there are many bathrooms that literally have the sign that on the door that it's a non-gendered bathroom. I'm trying to think of many. It depends on which part of the hospital you're in and where you are, but many of the bathrooms there are that way. Okay. The point out these laws not only raise civil rights issues, but health issues. When transgender people are barred from using bathrooms where they feel safe, they may end up suppressing bodily needs, resulting in health problems. You got to go, and there's no place to go. That's not good for your health, such as urinary tract or kidney infections, stool infections, hemorrhoids, and the like. When they are physically assaulted in public restrooms, they may suffer bruises, fractures, or worse. Fear of violence is real. So there are issues here. Okay, so you know, he obviously is in favor of trying to find a way where that can be avoided. Taharat, I'm sorry, Chevra Kadisha. What should we do for a Chevra Kadisha? He's not a transgender person. In the general rule, and I was in part of the Chevra Kadisha in Nashville, we had the men's group and we had the women's group. Very clear. It was that way for many, many years. I don't know. The worst problems we had, I remember the first time I had someone who died from AIDS. That was a problem. We tried to deal with that and we dealt with it. But now we have different issues that you use. What do you do when a transgender person dies? Who does a tahara? The tahara means you have the body with no clothing on it. You say some prayers. You literally pour water several times over the body, dry the body, and place the body in shrouds. Shrouds with linen garments. There are 3 of them. One is a very loose-fitting pants, and there are 2 that go over the upper part of the body. Also some things at the head. But they're plain white linen, no pockets. But you have to place them on the body after you've washed the body. So what do you do? So he's coming up with some suggestions. He's taking the traditional view, which I'm used to. A man may not prepare the body of a woman for burial, but a woman may prepare the body of a man. Whoa, what's that about? Anyone? Why is it? Now, this is the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch. This is the classic traditional view of Jewish law. Anyone suggest what's that about? Yeah, Rini? You're muted. We can't hear you. You're still muted.
I have an idea, but
Oh, Sima. Okay, Rini,
yeah, I think that
Okay, I got
okay, let's hear Sima and then Rini. Okay, Sima.
all right. I just have a man can abuse a woman's body. A woman can't really do much with a man's body when he's dead.
Okay.
Well, I had a different point of view. Is that a woman cares for children of both sexes and cares for people as nurses and so on before we had male nurses. And so a woman is used to caring for someone of the opposite sex.
Okay. Let's see. Commentators suggest 2 reasons. Reason 1. Commentating, okay. It seems to me that the reason is because of degradation and lewdness, which are greater when a man takes care of a woman with regard to cleaning up her and the like, than when a woman takes care of a man, because a man's lust is greater than of a woman. As we see, a man may not prepare for burial because of lascivious thoughts, but in the case of a woman, we are not so much concerned with lascivious thoughts.
So there you go.
There you go.
Do you agree with that one?
I just said that.
Okay. All right. Men, what do you think? It's okay if a woman would prepare your body for burial? Any comment there?
I don't think I'd care either way.
At the time, you probably wouldn't.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I mean, the point is that sexual thoughts were more likely for a male. Listen. I can, having been a patient in a hospital for a very long time, and frankly, you lose all sense of modesty. At some point, it's just like, whatever you're going to do, just do it.
Rabbi, that happens after a woman gives birth. We could care less after that. So
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
true.
Yeah. Okay.
And are used to having male doctors.
So say that again, Carol.
Women are used to having male doctors.
Yes, and men should be getting used to now having
Having
female
women-
doctors, because most of my doctors are women.
Right.
Right? We're all starting to get used to that nowadays.
I've had male nurses.
Yes, I had some male when I was I had a couple of male. I hate to say this, but the women were better. I'm sorry. This is, I know. I mean, they were. I mean, what can I tell you? Maybe it's because we're just not used to it, and we're just living in a traditional time, but I will say the women were terrific. And men were good too, but what can you say? Okay. But by the way, he says we must categorically reject these underlying premises, as we've rejected the notion that it's degrading for a man to care for a woman who is ill, or that men will become inappropriately aroused by hearing a woman's voice, right? In other words, there is a tradition, as you probably know, that hearing a woman's voice, like men should never, like in certain traditional communities, women don't give concerts for men. If a woman singer is giving a concert, it's only women allowed to attend. And that is somehow sexually arousing for a male to go hear, a woman singing. There is no evidence that men who are not otherwise psychologically impaired experience these types of thoughts from seeing or washing or dressing a female corpse. How much of the case of the Chevra Kadisha? However, he did say, there is no valid halakhic prohibition from either men or women, cis or trans, gay or straight, Notwithstanding that, he says the Chevra Kadisha members should perform the tahara of any body, must take into account the values of kavod hamet, honoring the dead, kavod habriot, personal dignity, and sniut, modesty, as they relate to both the deceased and the members of the Chevra Kadisha. We should therefore adhere. Now, here it comes out to an interesting conclusion. We should adhere to the traditional practice that the body of a transgender person should be prepared by members of the Chevra Kadisha of the same gender identity as the deceased, not the same born gender, the same gender identity. And he's not saying it matters whether or not you've had surgery or not had surgery, whether you've used hormones or not used hormones. What that person identifies as should be the same gender as the people who prepare the body. Okay? Yeah, Rini.
I would like to say that this is just one more reason I'm so happy to be Jewish, because all the laws that we all the ethics that we've gone over, like abortion and death and this one, all have to do with the health and well-being of the person involved, not some religious structure, particularly, at least in conservative Judaism. I can't speak.
Well, I would say this: the religious structure is there is a religious structure, and that is that the health is primary, right? So,
Right, but I mean not like, the Catholics or some other groups that are more, in my mind, arbitrary. We think of the person whose health is involved first.
well, let's just say this: other religions have some very strict gender roles and ideas about gender, and here we're seeing what Rabbi Sharzer is saying, and what we've seen before is this concern for the health of the person is the religious issue that we are applying to these cases. Okay.
Right, that's why I like being Jewish, because we are concerned about individuals, the health of individuals, which I find wonderful.
Okay, but we also should recognize, let's accept the fact that sometimes there are rules that can be challenging to us as well. So we just recognize that and be prepared for that and ask us how and why we see some challenging rules. Okay. Of course, the question of the mikvah. What about a transgender woman who wants to use the mikvah? His point is fairly clear. In the case of trans men or non-binary persons who menstruate, the laws of NIDA apply. Okay, that's a fair statement. And he says a greater degree of privacy there should be. And I will say in the mikvah that I have gone to where there have been conversions, I would say most modern mikvaot are very, very concerned with privacy in the way that they are constructed. Okay, Brit Milah. Okay. All right. Is Brit Milah required of transgender women? In other words, a person who was born with a penis who's now identifies as a male, should that person have a Brit Milah? And what he ultimately concludes, and I'm not going to go to this in any too great detail, the mitzvah of Brit Milah is based upon anatomy rather than gender and applies to any person with a penis. Okay, that's fairly, I think, straightforward. But he also has an interesting conclusion. We should teach publicly about the requirement of Brit Milah for anyone with male genitalia. And if specifically asked by a trans woman if she were obligated for Brit Milah, answer in the affirmative. Okay. But notice why is he doing this? Why has he put the but in caps and in bold? It is not an issue we should raise with her, just as we should not ask whether she has undergone genital reconstruction surgery, and just as we would not ask cis men, right, whether they have undergone Brit Milah or if they are circumcised in keeping with the standards of Kavod, Hametz, and Boshet. Right nowadays, by the way, you cannot automatically assume that every single male Jew has been circumcised. As you may or may not know, there are those who oppose circumcision in the Jewish community. Small number, it's true, but they do exist. So we call somebody up for an aliyah. By the way, excuse me, before you say the blessings, were you circumcised? We don't do that. It should be emphasized that the foregoing discussion applies to someone born Jewish and it's not to someone converting to Judaism. Okay, we just don't ask, don't tell. Okay, end point. Well, that's an interesting question too. Sometimes we assume that there's a very clear transition point for someone who is transgender. And what he in consultation with people who have gone through this, he says that gender transition is the process. In other words, there is sometimes for some people a process that takes time. And they may start doing or being medically treated, but there is a continuum here of it's an ongoing process unique to each individual, right? Some transgender people may claim their gender identity to friends and family. Renaming, outward person begin to wear gendered clothing, style in a different way. So his point is, the end point of the process for halakhic purpose comes when the transgender person asserts and expresses their gender identity, the names by which they wish to be called, the pronouns by which they choose to be referred, and the way they wish to live in society. It is at that point that the halakhic rulings in this teshuvah apply to them. So we should not assume that all of a sudden one day somebody changes who they are and what they are. It's again, I think it's a learning process for many of us to recognize that this is a process, sometimes a slow process. And also it depends on the individual and how comfortable they feel with friends, family, or the larger society. Okay, some issues. Rituals to mark the completion of transition. Should we have something at the synagogue to mark this? He says we don't have them. Maybe in the synagogue, like a bar mitzvah, an aliyah. He's basically saying we don't have anything at the moment, so we're still kind of trying to figure that out. Change of name. Although there is no specific Jewish ritual for changing a name in association with the process of transitioning, I was surprised somewhat, but I didn't mention that there is a way, something that we change a name. Do you know what that is? Someone who is ill, often in the very traditional community, and it is actually, I have been asked to do this once or twice, only in my 40 years. Oh, they're ill. It's based upon this superstition. The Malach HaMavet, the angel of death, is not very smart. And if the angel of death is looking for Chaim, but now all of a sudden Chaim is not Chaim, he's something else. Chaim, that's a bad choice. Let me start that again. Is Ruvain, but now the person who's near death is being called Chaim, the angel of death gets confused and the person lives. You may have heard or seen this. Yes, if you look in a very traditional rabbinic manual, you will find Shinui Hashem, changing a name. which usually means adding a name, like Chaim. Ed, you have a comment?
When I was young, 14, 15, I was in the hospital and the rabbi added Alta to my name.
Mhm. Okay, why did he, and you
Saying
know why he
Alta
added Alta,
for the same reason, I would assume.
right? Tell it, and just for those who don't know, explain to us Alta.
Alter is old man.
Right. So Ed, you're gonna be an old man, and how can an old man die as a teenager? Therefore, since you're the old man now, you're gonna get through this and live until, hey, guess what? It worked.
I
Until
am an old man, yeah.
now you're an old man. Now I can call you Alta.
And today I'm a year older.
Okay. No, but that's the same theory, right? Sometimes they add Chaim or Tova, some positive name. Alta makes sense, of course, because that's Yiddish for an old man. Okay, so he just says that, he's not sure what we should do. Synagogue rituals, that's a little more complicated. Bar and bat mitzvah is a gendered term. Your Hebrew name is gendered. So-and-so, the son of or the daughter of, these are gendered terms. Some transgender people will want only to change the terms from one gender to the others. Some will use neutral language. And we've seen some of these without using, not la'amod, instead of using a gendered ya'amod or ta'amod, which one is male and one is female, rather than using a gendered term to go somewhere to the Torah, he's suggesting you could say na la'amod, please come up, rather than you male person come up or you female person come up. So there are different things going on. Yeah, Rini?
We use that in our shul, Nala mode. But when the person comes up to give his or her name, that person still uses Ben or Bat. So it's, we're kind of leaving it up to the person to
Right.
tell what their name is, but it's
Right.
gender neutral calling up.
Right. And I've seen, some places I've seen instead have tried to stop using the term bar or bat mitzvah, mitzvah, brit mitzvah. I've seen that. I have to tell you, I don't know. It's hard to say how it feels. What about the talit? What gender do you identify with? If you identify as male, you have to wear a talit in most synagogues. If you identify as a female, you might be encouraged, but you wouldn't have to. Okay. Transgender children. Be aware of the challenges. A question might arise regarding Brit Milah if a couple adopted a convert or a 7 or 8-year-old trans girl. This gets really complicated. I can only say in my experience as in the rabbinate, there's only one case we had of a religious school student who was transitioning. And what I did at that time is I called in the Jewish Family Service and had a couple of social workers come over to talk to myself and the religious school director, so we could figure out what's the best way that we in the religious school could be sensitive to this child. It was a child at the time, and we found out ways to that were consistent with the best practices for her mental health. Okay, finally, conclusions. Excuse me. All conversions require conversion in a mikvah. Neither circumcision nor hatifat dam is required for transgender men, whether or not they have undergone gender-conforming surgery. Although hatifat dam brit is permissible, transgender women who have not undergone gender surgery do not require circumcision or hatifat dam brit. Okay. Okay. Transgender people who marry, well, remember we talked about if they are married and they transition later, they should try to get a get before they transition. Kiddushin is for marriages between male-identified person and female-identified people. We do have a type of ceremony for same gender couples, which actually I used once. I actually read a ketubah at a ceremony for a same gender couple, and the Rabbinical Assembly does have such a document. Brit Ahuvim, that's exactly what I used. Okay. if you choose to remain married, that's a choice, no ritual. Medical treatments with gender dysphoria is permissible. This does not include so-called conversion therapy aimed at changing the gender identity of the person. Okay. Healthcare should treat them in a careful way. We talked about tahara, brit milah. Okay. A transgender person is to be recognized as their publicly declared gender and to be addressed in their publicly declared name and pronouns. Ritual should be created. Okay. Any questions so far about where Rabbi Sharzer has spoken? No comments. Okay. I'm going to stop this share. We can take a quick look now at so therefore these are some of the rules we've seen. So what have the conservative and the reform movement said? And I have two statements here, which we'll go through. I think we're just going to confirm of some of we've seen. I think the more interesting ones are how Orthodoxy deals with it. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Let me go back. Screen share. Okay. Okay, everybody see that? Okay, everyone, oops, okay, everyone have that? Okay. Resolution affirming the rights of transgender and gender nonconforming people, 2016, the Rabbinical Assembly, organization that I'm a member of, conservative rabbis. And note that it began, as you know, remember Rabbi Barmesh always says, be sensitive to what these statements have in them, where they begin, where they go, and ask yourselves, where are they going? And notice it begins with that statement, whereas our Torah asserts that all humanity is created b'tselem Elohim, in God's divine image. So there already it's starting with a very positive statement about not disparaging anyone because of the gender that they are. And they mentioned the teshuva. Therefore, and it then goes and talks about there has been discrimination against gender and transgender and gender non-conforming people, right? Governments have extended protections. It's becoming the norm to affirm the dignity of transgender people. Now, this is a statement, whereas the literature of halacha, from the Mishnah to contemporary responsible, affirms the variety of non-gender expression throughout history. Yes, it does recognize that exists, granting transgender people the obligations and privileges of all Jews. That's more of a modern statement. I think they're kind of pushing it a little bit here. Whereas transgender people contribute to the vitality of our seminaries, synagogues, etc., etc., etc. Be it resolved that the Rabbinical Assembly affirm its commitment to the full welcome, acceptance, and inclusion of people of all gender identities in Jewish life and society. Encourage everyone to educate themselves about transgender people. Encourage all conservative movements, synagogues, camps, schools, and affiliate organizations to work towards becoming explicitly welcoming. That's a very important statement. Explicitly welcoming. Go to any synagogue website. We are a welcoming, warm congregation that welcomes everybody, right? You've seen that 1,000 times, but how many of them say we are a welcoming congregation that welcomes people, and then goes on and says transgender people, people in the gay community, people who converted to Judaism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so talking about explicitly welcoming them, evaluate their needs, educate their constituencies. Well, I'm trying to do that here, right? Okay, urge all levels of government to renew their policies to ensure full equality of transgender people under the law. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. Any comments or question on that? I think that we're not surprised. We're not surprised there at all. Now, the reform movement has a much longer statement. Here it is. Okay, this is more recent, 2023, Central Conference of American Rabbis. That's the Reform Rabbis Organization. Resolution on advocating for transgender people. Again, interesting, it starts in almost the same way that the conservative movement has done. Jewish tradition acknowledges and honors gender diversity as inherent in creation. Now, what is interesting here, here's the Reform movement who is less bound by Jewish tradition, but it wants to begin by pointing out certain things in Jewish tradition which are correct, which may or may not have an important impact on how we look at transgender people. The equality, uniqueness, and infinite value of each and every human being. That's almost the same, that's what the RA began with. Interesting, they do the first time we've seen this, but this is a midrash. This same first human being themselves represents gender diversity, for Rabbi Jeremiah taught that this earth creature was androgynous. Yes, there is a midrash that says that the first male and female, he created them. Yes, there is a midrash that says that this first creature was androgynous. Interesting, if you get to the Guggenheim Museum in the near future, there's a wonderful painting by Chagall that does show the first being, which it has two legs. Then at the hip, it divides into a male and to a female. They didn't mention in the commentary on the wall about why he was doing that, and I'm not sure Chagall was familiar with the midrash, but it was a very interesting painting that reflected this. Okay, we haven't seen this yet as it having implications for talking about transgender, which I think is correct. Work to safeguard the rights of every person. There was transgender, the people are threatened. And then what they do is they go into more detail. The Rabbinical Assembly just mentions this briefly, but here the Reform rabbis are pointing out in 2022, more than 300 anti-transgender bills were introduced in state legislatures. These harmful bills and rhetoric to protect children. In practice, they harm trans, non-binary, and gender diverse folks of all ages and stages. They have disproportionate, potentially catastrophic effect on trans children and adolescents. The real danger of sexual predators is not from transgender people, if you look at what happens in the real world. But that has become sort of a rallying cry. Laws target transgender people from questions of sports. That's an interesting question, which I'm not going to talk about right now. But the question of gender affirming care, criminalizing parents who help their children access life-saving and dignity affirming treatment, force schools to out people, and so on. So, right. This legislation contradicts the well-documented and well-researched current best practices of virtually every North American and international professional mental health society. Okay, and he points out that there are issues. They're really going into the science. Interesting, they really are going into the scientific and the political basis for what they're going to say in much more detail here. It's mentioned in the Rabbinical Assembly, but here they point out a study in 2016, gender nonconforming children aged 3 to 12 were raised in socially affirming families, showed lower rates of depression and anxieties, etc. Transgender and non-binary youth aged 12 to 22 who received gender-affirming hormone therapy experienced increased affect and life experiences and decreased depression and anxiety. So therefore, they have their conclusions, advocacy about laws, opposed discriminatory legislation, protecting transgender, non-binary, and gender diverse people, teaching and preaching and speaking about it, follow most up-to-date practices in gender inclusive language, life cycle rituals, communal membership, and other areas of Jewish life. What should your membership on your membership application? Old membership application for synagogue would say father, mother for parents, or male or female, right? There are languages that are used. Work to ensure broad access to gender affirming facilities, inclusion of gender diverse, and so on. Okay. Any question there on the reform movement? I think they're very clear. What they've done, though, is added a great deal about some of the issues, the problems that are faced both politically and medically. So,
Rabbi,
yes, Jack.
I'm sorry, I tuned in a little late, but what does Rashi have to say about this?
Jack, I knew you were going to ask that. And let me, again, in the medieval period, this was not really an issue. It's not because there weren't people at that period who were suffered from gender dysphoria. There had to be, let's face it. But in those times, people hid it or pretended otherwise. In other words, we're not going to find traditional. Remember, we found that one statement about a man who magically turns into a woman. And the rabbis, well, is like, and the basic question they're asking, is a Jewish divorce necessary? So this is not something we're going to expect to see in the traditional sources, and we don't see it, but that should not be surprising. Okay. So what does orthodoxy do? Well, let's take a look at several. I brought three or four actually statements from Orthodox rabbis, and they vary in their tone and what they say. Now, the first one, this was printed in the Israeli paper Haaretz, which, by the way, I should point out, is known as a liberal leftist publication, editorially. As a matter of fact, the Netanyahu government got really angry with it last week or the week before because it was criticizing the Netanyahu government. So 8 years ago, does Judaism support transgender rights? And the answer of this rabbi is absolutely not. The absurd attempts to show the Torah embraces transgender rights are manifestly deficient to anyone familiar with the Jewish religious tradition, obviously disagreeing with much of what we have said to this point. Now, who is writing this? Avi Shafram is a contributor to the American edition of Modia, and he is also the Aguda Yisrael of America. Aguda Yisrael is not modern Orthodoxy. Aguda Yisrael, if we look at, there's a big difference between, quote, modern Orthodoxy, which is very much involved in the secular world, and then as you start going to the right within Orthodoxy, you have various levels of strictness, separation, and refusal to engage in the secular culture, right? Aguda Yisrael is somewhat right-wing. It's certainly not the most right-wing. It does advocate interaction with the modern world, but it is clearly not what we would call modern Orthodoxy. So he's a pretty right-wing person, okay? So what does he say? The Hasidic leader known as the Berdichever, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berdichev, famously had only good things to say about Jews. He is said to have reacted to the sight of workers oiling their wagon wheels while reciting their morning prayers by lifting his eyes heavenward and declaring, "Even while they are working, your children pray to you." Maybe he'd respond similarly today to the sight of those email checkers during services. Okay, even when they're checking their email, they're at services, but okay. And maybe even to those who feel compelled to invoke biblical verses, even when attempting to justify decidedly unbiblical notions. Like Reform or Conservative or Open Orthodox. Now we're going to see. There is a phrase that you sometimes hear, Open Orthodox. They use certain terminology, which usually means they're more open to women's roles in Jewish life. There's a seminary now that educates women in the same way that it educates men. The men are called rabbis. The women are sometimes called Rabba. They've come up with a new term for them. And there are synagogues where, if you're used to the mechitza being that the division between men and women, the women are behind a curtain or in the balcony. In many of these synagogues, there's a mechitza. It runs down the middle of the synagogue, right through. So it's right on the main floor, one side of the main floor. It's not even this. Sometimes you see the main section is the men and the women are on the two sides. I've seen that in many places. No, in modern Orthodoxy, generally, the division is right down the middle of the floor. Okay. Who cite the divine declaration Genesis that it is not good for man to be alone as somehow overriding Leviticus's unequivocal forbidden of a man having relations with a male as with a woman, i.e., if a gay couple wants to be together, they're quoting saying that it's not a good idea for people to be alone. They should find a mate. And if the mate happens to be the same gender, most of the modern open Orthodoxy, conservative reformers say, okay, good, right? But he says no, okay? Of the latest iteration of absurdity, the claim that the Torah offers a highly elastic view of gender, admittedly, that is a question. Yes, God is neither male or female. God transcends gender, yes. But some of the proofs, and he's used by those who advocate for transgender rights in Judaism, admittedly are, shall we say, a bit pushed. For example, you spell the Hebrew word for she, which is he, just to confuse you, with a vav, which could but doesn't allow the word to be pronounced as a masculine pronoun. Yeah. I mean, that's just a peculiarity of Hebrew spelling. It has nothing to do with gender. That's true. Okay. To be sure, two Midrashic sages assert that the first human was originally androgynous or a double creation, and a man and woman joined at their backs. Okay. But to vault from that truism to the conclusion that Judaism holds that gender is not a matter of either or, again, I have to agree with Rabbi Safran. He's right about that. However, here's where he then takes off. The Torah is unequivocal about the fact that being born in a male body requires living the life of a male, and that being born in a female implies living as a woman. Indeterminate biological sex, or rare but rare concussions, is dealt with length of the Torah. Right? We know in the Talmud we spoke about those four, the different, people that sometimes babies are born with indeterminate genitalia. Yes, we know about that. Now, he is right, but that doesn't mean, as we've seen, that there are an infinite number of genders. No, as we've seen before, the Torah and the Talmud is gendered, male and female. And it's true, each gender has a particular life role to play. Well, there again, he's making that assumption, which is a pre-modern world assumption, which assumes that women are not able or can or should perform mitzvot as men. Now, in the Reform of the conservative movement, we don't agree with that, okay? For most of us, that doesn't present any great trial. For some, apparently it does. What that means from a truly Jewish perspective is that such people are privileged to have a supplementary challenge to overcome in their lives. So what is his argument? If you have gender dysphoria, that should be seen as a challenge to you that you need to overcome. You have to get over it. You have to fight against it. It's a challenge to be overcome. In addition to the myriad more mundane trials faced by us all, that your understanding of your gender, he is now making that equivalent with the fact that some of us are not good at math, right? I mean, that's what he's basically saying. And you should overcome it. Taking on the life of a different sex other than one's body indicates is in the Torah view as futile as an average height and portly fellow like me, imagining yourself as a 7'4" point guard. Actually, 7'4", you'd probably be a center. He doesn't know much about basketball, right? Can you imagine a 7'4" point guard? I can't, sorry. You got to be agile and move fast if you're a point guard. Sorry. Okay. And insisting on being accepted by the NBA, the body gods gave us are indications of what we are and what we are not. In fact, the notion that we have some right to ignore our biology is the rejection of the most essential idea of the Jewish faith. That's a pretty strong statement right there. For Judaism is not about our wishes, but our responsibilities, not about our comfort, but our service. Okay, that's a nice sentence. I can agree with that. Attaining the happiness and harmony Rabbi Sameth sees as resulting from choosing one's sex. Here, he notice what he does. He puts that in parentheses, the idea that a transgender or gay person is just making a choice comes from accepting divine will, not seeking to subvert it. Judaism isn't about trying to stretch the Torah's fabric to suit our personal longings, but about bending our longings to fulfill God's will. Okay, I'm sure cheeseburgers taste good, but okay, I'm not going to eat them. Fine, that's one thing. But we're talking about something more serious here. Such self-denial, admittedly, is an unpopular notion in these liberated days. I would agree with him. Listen, there are a lot of things that I would like to do on Saturday or Friday night, but I don't do them because it's Shabbat. Fine, I understand that. But Judaism has been stubbornly countercultural since Sinai. I kind of like that statement, by the way. It rejected the idolatries. It stood against the societal evils that informed Greek, Roman, and subsequent cultures, no less. Hey, we're about to celebrate Hanukkah. That's true. And it does not yield either to contemporary mores. Well, what do you mean by contemporary mores? There you have to be a little bit more careful. It is clear that there are people who are deeply conflicted about their gender identities. Okay, he agrees with that. We must feel nothing but compassion for them. Now, here's where he then starts going. Notice what he's doing here. He's saying the people who are conflicted about their gender identities, that is a challenge that to manage their dysmorphias and make their way through their lives. But encouraging such individuals to reject the roles consonant with their bodies is, from a Jewish perspective, wrong. Here he's arguing, now we can understand, yes, Judaism very often is standard as countercultural against the values of the society. Fine. But now he's arguing that the people with gender dysphoria are just challenges, right? And invoking spurious sources from the Torah to do so is to borrow from Isaac Asimov, wronger than wrong. So his contention is that your gender is set by your physical body. And if you feel that you are something other than what your physical body is, that isn't something that endangers your health, makes it very difficult for you to function. That's just another challenge, right? Just as it may be a challenge to get up early in the morning to go to Minyan because you don't like getting up early in the morning. I can relate to that. But he's trying to make that a parallel, as opposed to saying, as we see in Rabbi Sharzer, gender identity is inborn, and it's something medical that needs to be seen as something that can be healed, and we have to deal with this as a reality, not as just, oh, it's just a challenge. And then he ends, what would the Berditch of a rabbi somehow see something positive in a Jew like Rabbi Sameth feeling the Torah needs to find a source for promoting something wrong? I don't know. But what I do know is that he would never call a wrong a right. Right? So his argument is gender identity is determined by physical structures. If you're physically structured one way, that's it. If you feel you want to be another way, that's just one of those many challenges. Some people are good at music, some people are good at languages, and some people have to work a lot harder to learn a different language than other people. That's true. And therefore, that's a challenge. And there are a lot of challenges you have in life. And this is just a challenge because God made you the way you are by your physical characteristics, and that's God's plan for you. Right? Comments, questions? Yeah, Rini.
Well, this is a very Christian point of view. I mean, the Orthodox, because there's so many Christian factions that send their children to conversions and, are very strict about it. So to me, this is not the Jewish religion that I like. I like the conservative.
Well, we do find a convergence in the worldview of the more conservative Christians on some issues and the more right-wing orthodoxy. That is correct. We do see that they're often allies on some of these social issues. Now, again, one can argue socially, we've got problems in America with social media and sexuality in social media, right? And things of that nature, and even TikTok, whether it should be legal or not. But you're right that there sometimes is that convergence in the where we see this. Ed, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, there was something on the news yesterday about these websites that have popped up where you can submit a picture, usually of a girl, and they'll send you back a nude picture of her.
Yes. There's a high school student who had that happen to her, and now they're trying to have government regulation over these sites. That's correct. AI is able to do that. So, there are certain social ills in our society where we can agree, even in the more liberal parts of Judaism, to say, we've got some problems here with social media and some of the things that AI can do. But here, as Rini points out, sometimes in the cases, for example, you sometimes see the issue of abortion, where you have a convergence of interests within the more traditional Jewish communities. Although we know the traditional Jewish view is that the mother's health comes first. By the way, Judaism is not pro-choice. Let's be clear on that. But the very traditional Jewish communities sometimes become even more restrictive in their views because it's part of a worldview. It's a part of seeing what of creating strict lines of definition, male, female. That's it. There's not there's a worldview that just sees things in a very rigid outlook. Okay, our time is just about up. So let me take that down. Okay, let me next time I'll take a look at two other Orthodox sources that take a little bit different positions from Rabbi Safran. Do you want to take a look? I mean, it's not exactly part of this class, but it's part of educating ourselves. Do you want to take a look at that doctor from Mount Sinai and see what she has to say? We can look at that text. I found it to be very enlightening in terms of this debate about therapy, especially when we talk about it's become a huge political issue. Therapy for transgender teenagers, right? We've seen that become a wedge issue, as we like to say, and we also saw the commercials during the campaign. Yeah, so next time, what we'll do is we'll take a look at two or three other articles, two or three, I don't remember, articles from Orthodoxy to see that Rabbi Safran is not universally accepted. And then we'll look at the other one. If we have time, I will say this, the next chapter that the next topic we're going to study is from the new book. And I'm going to go through it.
Rabbi.
I'm sorry?
Yes, Chicago.
Oh, thank you. And we're going to go through different parts of the book. I'm not going to do everything in here, but I will do text 1.2. Whistleblowing, the requirements to report employer wrongdoing. I know we touched upon that. How long has this class been going on? I'm losing track. I believe we touched upon that at one point in the past, but this is a very interesting discussion as to when it is appropriate to blow the whistle when you see something wrong that's going on in your employment. What are the ethical issues? And there's a very good teshuvah in the book, which we're going to look at in detail after we finish talking about. And we may, I'm not very good about figuring out how long the classes are going to last and how long the subject is going to take us. But I think about it, maybe next time about half the class will finish this topic and then start the other. Then again, we're off December 31st. We meet the 24th, but we're off. We will not meet on the 31st. Okay, any other comments, questions, concerns?
Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
See you
Thank you,
next
Rabbi.
time. Just about
Yes, Chicago.
I'll still be before Hanukkah, right?
Yeah,
Hanukkah
it'll be the
that
day
night, I
before.
believe, right? So get all your candles and your menorahs and buy your dreidels and your gelt and whatever else. There is no end to the schlock you can buy for Hanukkah nowadays.
Our shul is having a trip instead of for Chinese food, we're having a trip for vegetarian Indian food, and everybody on Christmas night, the first night of Hanukkah, and whoever's coming is supposed to bring a Chanukiah with
Oh,
two
very nice.
candles, and we'll all light candles together after having had Indian food.
Well, the synagogue is doing this, right, Charlie? Is that that's not your committee, I don't think. Or is it? Well, you're still muted. We can't hear Charlie. We can't hear you. I mean, there is a Chinese dinner the night of is it the 25th? I think it's
Yes,
25th.
it is the
Christmas.
25th, Rabbi.
25th. Okay, I signed up.
6
Hope to
p.m.
see you there.
Good.
You can get your Chinese food at the synagogue. Where are they getting? Do you know where they're getting it from? Okay, I mean, that's the important thing, right? But no, it'll be a kosher Chinese meal at the synagogue. I hope some of you will sign up, but we'll see you on the 24th and have a good week in between and a lovely day. Thank you all for coming.
You
Thank you,
too.
Rob.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Rabbi.
Bye-bye.
Bye.